May 14, 1945. The outskirts of Bad Aibling, Bavaria. Dawn breaks through scattered clouds, revealing battered rail lines and war fatigue sprawled across empty fields. The air is tense, heavy with the scent of burnt fuel and distant gunpowder. Boots crunch through wet grass as a column of surrendering auxiliaries forms near an old barn. Among them walk two women, neither more than 25, their uniforms threadbare yet official, Luftwaffe eagles perched awkwardly on worn caps. Maria clutches a battered medical satchel as her comrade Lotta tries not to shiver in the early light. Papers rustle, orders issued the night before. The American sentries exchange hushed words, uncertain what to do with the newcomers. These are not frontline soldiers. They are Wehrmachthelferinnen, female radio operators, signalers, and anti-aircraft auxiliaries. Their war has been one of codes, wires, and endless administrative forms. And now they walk into captivity, side by side with the defeated men of the Wehrmacht. What they do not know is this: the fate awaiting them in captivity will blur every line, victor and vanquished, soldier and civilian. Their march into the prison camps will become one of history's silent epilogues, echoing the cost of war beyond the battlefield. "She must have seen and gone through some terrible things," one onlooker would later comment, recalling the 1,000-yard stare in Lotta's eyes. The end of the Third Reich unleashed chaos across Europe. Allied armies spilled over borders, sweeping up remnants of resistance, men and women alike. For years, Wehrmachthelferinnen had filled critical gaps, operating radios during air raids, relaying urgent orders for panicked counterattacks, manning spotlights during flak bursts above silent cities. Yet as surrender loomed, their technical skills meant little. Statistics tell a grim story. Over 500,000 German women served as military auxiliaries, with thousands captured in final battles across the Western and Eastern fronts. For the Allies, these women complicated established doctrine. Were they combatants or civilians? Should the Geneva Conventions apply? Would their captivity differ from that of ordinary soldiers? Official solutions failed them. Bureaucracy moved slowly. Camps were overcrowded, provisions scarce. Conditions varied sharply. Those surrendering to American and British forces often faced short internments, but in the East, under Soviet hands, suspicion and hostility brought harsher reprisals. In the months after surrender, female POWs witnessed disease surge through barracks, rations dwindle, and order dissolve into discipline by necessity. Some camps separated women, others did not. Reports filtered back: typhus outbreaks in Bergen-Belsen, forced labor orders in Poland, interrogations in France and Czechoslovakia. The hardship coming to them now is that they are going to be living in post-war Germany. "Things could be a lot worse," wrote one observer, noting the fragile safety of those held in the American zone compared to the devastation faced in Russian custody. Not all in uniform held weapons, and not every auxiliary accepted the fate mapped by high command. Maria Bauer, a radio operator from Dresden, joined the Wehrmachthelferinnen to avoid the munitions factories. Her 6 years in service brought her from the soundproof rooms beneath flak towers to the front row of collapse. Known for her blunt honesty, Maria saw the cost of errors firsthand. When communication lines failed during the defense of Berlin, she spent 18 sleepless hours manually relaying orders, watching her colleagues crumble as bombs shook the earth overhead. On VE Day, she attended the burial of her closest friend, a coder lost to a stray shell during surrender negotiations. Maria's motivation was not glory or patriotism, but an obsessive hope for order, a belief that clear information could save lives, that no woman's role was too small to matter. "It's not about medals," she'd later tell a Red Cross worker. "It's about going home alive, even if home is nothing as it was before." Air raid sirens blare over Hamburg as bombs turn night to day. Beneath a reinforced steel dome, Maria Bauer crouches beside the switchboard, her pencil trembling. Orders shriek across the phone lines: evacuate the children's ward, redirect ambulances, scramble the 88mm flak batteries. Suddenly, static cuts off her line. Operators freeze, panic rising. Maria has an idea born of desperation. She reroutes her headset through an untested secondary circuit, one meant for training drills, not live command. Ignoring the protests of her superior, "That's for exercises only," she patches 2 limp wires together with trembling fingers. The connection holds. Commands flow again. For 4 harrowing hours, her improvised setup saves dozens of civilian lives. When the air clears, a senior officer tears the headset from her hand. "This isn't protocol, Fräulein Bauer. Improvisation is dangerous. It's not your place." Maria's hands are shaking, but she holds his gaze. "Neither is letting people die for no reason," she says quietly. Outside, she scribbles a sketch of her impromptu circuit on a ration card. 2 blurred lines, a bridge between system and chaos. The simplicity stuns her. She wonders how many solutions have died in silence, never tried because they weren't allowed. Sometimes the only thing standing between disaster and salvation, Maria would reflect years later, is the willingness to break instructions. The Wehrmacht was a world of order and hierarchy, and for its female auxiliaries, those boundaries were even stricter. Innovations, especially from women, faced skepticism and derision. Maria's circuit bypass made its way up through the flak tower staff. Within days, she was summoned by an administrative captain known for his cold precision. He dismissed her before she could speak. "Your deviations from protocol jeopardized the chain of command." Maria found herself transferred to a supply depot, her improved circuit quietly discarded. Others fared worse. A fellow Flakhelferin tried introducing faster Morse code abbreviations. She was ridiculed. "Leave the thinking to the men." In the canteen, rumors swirled. Were these Blitzmädchen, these lightning girls, truly needed, or just a desperate measure by a regime running out of men? Yet behind the controversy, some commanders, harried, exhausted, silently adopted the advances. They called it quiet improvement, done at night, never entered in the logs. Technical progress in wartime often begins with rules broken and credit unclaimed. "They said it was improper," recalled veteran Hildyar, "but when the bombs fell, they stopped asking who patched the lines, only whether the guns still answered." March 1943. A sprawling Luftwaffe barracks outside Vienna. The first all-female communications shift. 26 young women huddle around humming machines and signal lamps, their breaths visible in the chill air. Officers patrol the hallways, skeptical. One mutters, "This is for propaganda, not survival." Lotte feels sweat gather under her collar as the lights flicker with the first code transmission of the night. Would the new system, patched together after hours from Maria's forbidden sketch, remain stable? At 2:12 a.m., the line cracks to life. Enemy bombers are inbound, their signature decoded moments before the first anti-aircraft searchlight sweeps the sky. The new signal relay holds. Oswald, the shift's only male supervisor, stares at the oscillograph, speechless. By dawn, Vienna's civilian shelters are full, the casualty count lower than anyone expected. "I never believed I'd thank a girl for saving my barracks," one gnarled gunner muttered. But there it was, the right warning, at the exact right time. Relief is mixed with disbelief. Officially, the women's solution will not be credited. Yet word spreads. If you want the lines to hold, you ask the Blitzmädchen. May 1945. The war in Europe collapses with brutal swiftness. Wehrmachthelferinnen units, once vital cogs in Germany's military machine, now find themselves on the march, captives rather than commanders. Maria and Lotte, along with thousands of others, are herded into prisoner columns, traversing shattered towns and open fields. The desperation is palpable. Their fate depends greatly on where they surrender. Western Allied troops, though wary, generally treat female auxiliaries in line with Geneva Convention's protocols, separating them from combatants, processing them into temporary holding camps with basic medical and sanitation provisions. Many are released within months, a process accelerated by their non-combatant roles. Conversely, those captured by Soviet forces endure harsher, often brutal conditions. Seen as extensions of an enemy war machine, these women face suspicion and punitive labor assignments. Conditions in Soviet-run POW camps were notably severe, with inadequate food, exposure, and little medical care. For the female auxiliaries, this was a moment when their identities were questioned. Were they soldiers, civilians, victims, or perpetrators? The shifting public narrative complicated attempts to honor their sacrifice. Post-war German society, eager to recast women as victims or mothers, often marginalized stories of female Wehrmacht service. Political agendas in both East and West Germany suppressed many accounts of their wartime experience. Yet within the camps and fragmented records there emerged a quiet revolution. a re-evaluation of the women's roles, from derided Blitzmädchen to resilient survivors. Their survival was a testament both to their technical skill and human spirit. The statistics are stark. Over 500,000 women served as Wehrmachthelferinnen during World War II, fulfilling essential roles across communication, anti-aircraft defense, and administration. While almost none held combat status, their contributions sustained frontline operations. Thousands became prisoners of war, enduring captivity alongside male soldiers. The impact was profound. Camps faced compounded logistical burdens housing mixed-gender populations, forcing Allied administrators to reconsider internment policies. Casualty rates among female POWs were lower than their male counterparts, but remained significant due to disease, hunger, and exposure. The suffering understated, yet no less real. They became invisible markers of war's extension beyond battlefields, women caught in the machinery of total war. Their presence challenged enemy assumptions. Soviet troops had to reconcile fighting women dressed as soldiers. Western commanders had to navigate the complexities of international law, interpreted through gendered lenses. The legacy of the Wehrmachthelferinnen shaped the post-war treatment of women in military conflict zones thereafter. For decades after the war, the story of the Wehrmachthelferinnen faded into the background, one of history's invisible revolutions. Over 500,000 women had served in direct support of Germany's war machine, the majority as non-combatants, but essential for logistics, administration, communication, and anti-aircraft defense. Many underwent brief training, sometimes just 12 weeks, before serving in countless roles. From telephone exchanges in Berlin to flak towers in Vienna, and even staff assignments in occupied territories like France, Poland, and Norway. Their efforts made it possible for male soldiers to fight on the front lines, substituting for soldiers in the inner workings of military organization. Yet, their presence profoundly altered the societal landscape. Nazi ideology had originally resisted mass mobilization of women, fearing a loss of morale and feminine virtue. By 1943, however, the relentless demands of total war compelled the regime to mobilize female labor at unprecedented scales, including for anti-aircraft units and signals corps. At the height, entire flak gun batteries were operated by women, their technical competence as critical as any male unit. When the war ended, these women returned to civilian society carrying a unique stigma. Some, like Maria and Lot, found their wartime experiences were met with suspicion or disdain. Their contribution challenged traditional gender norms. Many were branded not as veterans, but as Blitzmädchen, a condescending nickname. Harsh gossip, post-war shame, and the difficulty of reintegration haunted them. Some faced derision, accused of inappropriate relationships with officers, or ostracized in their communities. We were told to go home and forget, but you can't forget being shelled, or saving lives, or losing friends when the sirens fail, admitted Ilse, a former Flakhelferin, at a 1970s reunion. Despite the silence, their professional camaraderie endured through private reunions and the formation of tight-knit memory communities, spaces where women could recall, mourn, and celebrate a shared history denied by the public narrative. Internationally, the legacy of the Wehrmachthelferinnen prefigured greater roles for women in military spheres. In post-war Germany, the lessons of female technical expertise quietly contributed to a new understanding. The revolution is complete when it becomes invisible, when you cannot imagine the military operating without women behind every radio, switchboard, or searchlight. For decades after the war, the story of the Wehrmachthelferinnen faded into the background, one of history's invisible revolutions. Over 500,000 women had served in direct support of Germany's war machine, the majority as non-combatants but essential for logistics, administration, communication, and anti-aircraft defense. Many underwent brief training, sometimes just 12 weeks, before serving in countless roles, from telephone exchanges in Berlin to flak towers in Vienna, and even staff assignments in occupied territories like France, Poland, and Norway. Their efforts made it possible for male soldiers to fight on the front lines, substituting for soldiers in the inner workings of the military organization. Yet their presence profoundly altered the societal landscape. Nazi ideology had originally resisted mass mobilization of women, fearing a loss of morale and feminine virtue. By 1943, however, the relentless demands of total war compelled the regime to mobilize female labor at unprecedented scales, including for anti-aircraft units and signals corps. At the height, entire flak gun batteries were operated by women, their technical competence as critical as any male unit. When the war ended, these women returned to civilian society carrying a unique stigma. Some, like Maria and Lot, found their wartime experiences were met with suspicion or disdain. Their contribution challenged traditional gender norms. Many were branded not as veterans, but as Blitzmädchen, a condescending nickname. Harsh gossip, post-war shame, and the difficulty of reintegration haunted them. Some faced derision, accused of inappropriate relationships with officers, or ostracized in their communities. We were told to go home and forget, but you can't forget being shelled or saving lives or losing friends when the sirens fail, admitted Ilse, a former Flakhelferin, at a 1970s reunion. Despite the silence, their professional camaraderie endured through private reunions and the formation of tight-knit memory communities, spaces where women could recall, mourn, and celebrate a shared history denied by the public narrative. Internationally, the legacy of the Wehrmachthelferinnen prefigured greater roles for women in military spheres. In post-war Germany, the lessons of female technical expertise quietly contributed to a new understanding. The revolution is complete when it becomes invisible, when you cannot imagine the military operating without women behind every radio, switchboard, or searchlight. The trains that carried Maria and Lotte home after their release from POW camps rolled across a Germany devastated by loss, fields tilled by hunger, cities stitched with rubble, families learning new silences. For every auxiliary who returned, countless others simply vanished into the tumult of the late 1940s, their stories swept under the new order's imperative to rebuild and forget. Reintegration was a journey fraught with shame and secrecy. Wartime experience, once a badge of technical proficiency, became burdened with suspicion. Many former Wehrmachthelferinnen were dismissed as complicit in Nazi crimes. Others were accused of moral failures or shunned for their ambiguous place between military and civilian life. Communities sometimes whispered about their romantic ties with officers or questioned their motivations for joining, forgetting the pressure, necessity, and ideological fervor that had swept up millions. For Maria, the struggle was personal and relentless. She found work as a typist in a local government office, her extraordinary skills in signals and electronics now dismissed as superfluous. Only in late-night conversations with other former auxiliaries, over bitter coffee, laughter tinged with grief, did she reclaim her story. According to post-war analysis, most of the female Wehrmacht auxiliaries had been recruited from organizations like the League of German Girls, Bund Deutscher Mädel, BDM, where state ideology and peer pressure worked in tandem with practical appeals. Patriotic service, escape from monotonous civilian life, or the promise of camaraderie and adventure. We believed we were rebuilding the nation, not destroying it, remembered a former supply depot worker. The distance between intention and consequence would haunt survivors for decades. After 1945, the legacy of the Helferinnen underwent constant revision. East and West Germany alike minimized discussion of their contributions, emphasizing female victimhood or the collective guilt of National Socialism. Some, like the former SS Helferinnen, faced explicit denazification tribunals and conflicted judgments. Most, however, simply faded into the civilian workforce, their roles in total war acknowledged only in private reunions and the occasional footnote in history books. The story of the Wehrmachthelferinnen survives today in aging photo albums, fragmented oral testimonies, and rare reunions of those who served. Each voice adds a thread to the broader tapestry, a reminder that history is not simply written by victors, but shaped by the silent persistence of those rarely celebrated. He never sought fame, only fewer funerals. For Maria, Lotte, and the thousands like them, this quiet integrity became their final legacy. As the decades rolled onward, Germany's wartime auxiliaries became a silent model for women in military and technical roles worldwide. The hardships of captivity, the prejudice of post-war society, and the technical innovations forged under bombardment remained quietly alive in industrial and defense circles. By the late 20th century, their practical skills and wartime resilience had shaped the framework for Germany's new Bundeswehr and civil defense, where, for the first time, women were actively recruited, trained, and respected for roles once reserved for men. Across NATO and beyond, countries revisiting their military doctrines saw echoes of the Wehrmachthelferinnen, women staffing control rooms, operating radars, directing logistics, and carrying the burden of national security. But the price paid for innovation, defiance, and survival lingered long after the uniforms had been folded away. For those like Maria and Lotta, the struggle was not just for technical recognition, but for dignity, memory, and the right to tell the truth about war from the periphery. In private, their stories became anchors for generations, cautionary tales of duty distorted by ideology, but also reminders of the capacity for courage and adaptation in the darkest hours. Every carrier in the world still carries her idea, and her refusal to accept needless death, one historian would later write, reflecting on the ways simple acts of improvisation became doctrine. Today, every woman entering a control room, handling a cryptographic wire, or deploying in a humanitarian mission walks, unseen perhaps, in the footsteps of those who paved the way under fire and scrutiny. The invisible revolution is complete when history stops asking who should serve, and instead asks only how best to protect and preserve human life. Their names may be lost, but their legacy endures, in every ration card turned into a circuit, every survivor who returned, and every memory quietly preserved against forgetting, wrote a contemporary archivist. Now, as footage and forgotten records emerge, it falls to us, the viewers and chroniclers of history, to bear witness anew. To see not just the uniforms, the ranks, or the shame of defeat, but the human faces and hands that shaped a century out of chaos. Let us honor the resilience and innovation of those who served in silence, and never forget that every grave, every wire, and every surviving story holds a lesson for the future. If you wish to continue this journey through unknown history, subscribe for more cinematic stories, each one lighting the shadows of the past with the truth and emotion only these voices can bring.